Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Let's talk about it. For those who don't know, Brandon Sanderson is a pillar of the fantasy genre, and he is a writing juggernaut that is just determined to make the rest of us feel bad. During a little thing called the pandemic, where most of us were just struggling to keep our mental health afloat, this man wrote not one, not two, but 4 extra books. What do I mean by extra? I mean, this man has an ongoing schedule of books he needs to write for the current series that he has in his overall Cosmere universe. And these 4 were not a part of it. These were funsy little things that he just wrote on the side, full-on novels, because since he no longer had to do interviews or go to conventions because of the pandemic, he had all this extra time. I cannot with this man. I wrote 0 books during the pandemic. Not salty about it. Anywho, Tress of the Emerald Sea is one of those 4 books. My internet book friends, Rosica and Jay, read this book and really liked it and recommended it. And so of course I wanted to read it, and that motivated me to move it up on my list, but it also made me worried because what if I don't like it? Now, going into the book, my biggest worry was the world building, because I have a hard time if I can't suspend my disbelief and turn off my brain to certain fantasy elements. But I'll get into that in a second. I figured I'd start with the synopsis. The only life Tress has known on her island home in an emerald green ocean has been a simple one, with the simple pleasures of collecting cups brought by sailors from faraway lands and listening to stories told by her friend Charlie. But when his father takes him on a voyage to find a bride and disaster strikes, Tress must stow away on a ship and seek the sorceress of the deadly Midnight Sea. Amid the spore oceans where pirates abound, can Tress leave her simple life behind and make her own place sailing a sea where a single drop of water can mean instant death. I will start with a general overview, and I will keep it spoiler-free for the most part. But some of the things I really want to talk about are spoilery, so editor Kelly will probably put a number in on when to, you need to tune out. But I think I bring up some good points, so it might be worth your while to know what those are to determine if this is the book for you or not. I want to clarify, I liked this book. I had a good time with it. It helped me out of a reading funk when my mood was bad. So whatever happens in the rest of this video, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. As the synopsis talks about, there are these different oceans, or no, not oceans, seas, bodies of not water, but spores. And the spores do different things, but essentially what triggers it is water. And that made me really scratch my head. I'm like, we're made of water, we sweat water, there's rain, there's crying, there's just the humidity in our breath. I was very dubious of how that would work, having just seas of it, being surrounded by it. But I shouldn't have been too scared because Brandon does a really good job. There is still suspension of disbelief. This isn't a real thing, obviously. So there's always going to be a little bit of a leap where you just have to go with it. But Brandon does a good job of embodying just enough sciencey mechanisms, or how he describes it in a way where I'm like, oh, okay. All right, I can roll with this. I can sail past the few moments where I'm like, I'm pretty sure she would have just died, but okay. So that was a really funny thing off the gate, that I was so nervous about it, and it kind of was a non-issue for me. Other things. I like the protagonist. I like Tress. I think she is an interesting character on her own, but also in juxtaposition to other female heroines. You have it to where one of Brandon's inspirations was Princess Bride, and he and his wife, I think, were watching it, and she was like, oh, it would have been nice if like Buttercup actually went to try to like find Wesley. And Brandon was like, don't mind if I do. And so you have this person who's not an adventure-seeking person and is like totally content with her life on this like kind of barren island called the Rock, with just this like small town of people who are kind of forced to be there. And she just collects cups and she's like, cool, that's good. I'll just wash some windows. That's fine. So I like that. I appreciated that. It was a nice change of pace. She was a very pleasant character. It was good to go along with her. And I had an enjoyable time watching her grow and like discover new aspects to herself. And that is part of the theme or messaging of this book as well, is that you can be true to yourself, but also being true to yourself changes as you change throughout life naturally. I think that's something that's not talked about a lot, so I'm glad that's in here. I will say sometimes I felt like the messaging was a bit too frequent, but it is for young adults, so that's fine. That's good. It's all good messages, so that's okay. What else do I want to talk about in this non-spoilery section? There's a very peculiar decision made very early on in this book that I don't necessarily like, which is that, so she ends up on a pirate ship, as you do. Not a spoiler, synopsis says it. But there's a lot of people needed for a crew for like a big ship. And so the decision is made that minus a handful of crew members that are going to be part of the plot, all the other crew members are called Dougs for convenience. And the joke or reasoning is that like Doug, no matter the planet, no matter the world, is a really common name. So we're just gonna call them Dougs. I didn't like that. Like, I understand the necessity as a writer of like, I gotta limit names in this book. I cannot have 20 million characters. But I felt like it reduced the impact of some of the moments that happen later on, some that are meant to be more emotional or tense or dramatic, kind of got undermined by this thing that was played up as a joke, but just kind of didn't fit for every scene or situation, if you will. And then we have Charlie, who is Tress's love interest slash the person she's going to find and save, the Wesley of this world. And he's cute. He's cute. They had some, like a little moment before, you know, everything went down, you know, that normalcy, so you can see what their life is like before it all changes. And he's cute. I liked him as a love interest. The rest I want to say is, I'll save for the spoilery bit. And then we have Captain Crow, who's like not the final boss, but is one of the baddies. And Soleil, Fort, Hoyd, and the Sorceress. So the Sorceress is the final boss, if you will. She lives in the Midnight Sea. It's related to the storyline of saving Charlie. For reasons I'll get into later, Act 3 really felt flat for me. And it was so peculiar because even though the Sorceress is made to be this big to-do, she got very little page time. And by the time like we reach her, there was very little book left. And so I was just like, okay. And some of what happens, I feel like, really took the sails out of Tress's journey and like her moment to really shine and like have victory, and put it on this other character. And I'm like, I guess, okay. We journeyed this far in the book and in this world on the seas for this. Kind of a bummer. It's what led it to being more of like a 3.5 for me than originally when it started out in Act 1. I thought it was going to be like a 4.5. And like I said, I did enjoy it. I still think it's an enjoyable read, but depending on how you feel about Act 3 will determine if it's like good versus great, is my thought. And so one of the things that changes is the narration. So in the beginning, you have a narration that in a lot of ways is very reminiscent of Princess Bride. You have this like outside perspective that is witty and got a turn of phrase and just like this outsider who's having commentary. I would have loved it for it to just be that. Like the narrator did not need to be part of the story, did not be part of the plot, but that's not the case. The narrator is a part of the story, and so like as the story progresses, his voice becomes more and more dominant. And as you learn more about him, the voice changes to be a little bit more specific to his struggle and his predicament and like talking more about himself. And I'm like, I just don't care. And it's one of those things where like, even when it wasn't frustrating or in the way for me, I'm like, no, I want Tress. I don't want you to take up more like page time. And so I tried to pull some quotes of the stuff I really loved in the beginning and then how it progressed to where it's like, okay, I didn't find ideal ones for the progression. So it's kind of hard to prove my point. But to me, it proves my own point of like, because I was looking in the Goodreads quote section that no one thought it was good enough to quote the later bits of his like quirkier voice stuff. So, okay, so here are some of the quotes I really liked. It might be said that Tress had a way with words, in that her words tended to get in her way. Cute, simple, love it. Men often described the girl as having hair the color of wheat. Others called it the color of caramel, or occasionally the color of honey. The girl wondered why men so often used food to describe women's features. There was a hunger to such men that was best avoided. This was in the first couple of pages. I cackled at that one. That was a good one. And that's the thing, there's like certain moments or observations that are just a hoot. I was very amused. It had me smiling. I was having a good time. Last one for early narrator bits. Do you know how many grand romances would have avoided tragedy if the hero had thought, maybe I should ask her if she likes me first? Here are the two quotes I found that kind of give a vibe of how the narrator's voice becomes more centered on himself, but they're not the best ones, but they're the ones I could find, and they don't spoil anything. My relationship to fashion was in those days akin to that of a 15-pound spiked mace to an unarmored forehead. Second quote. Plus, every time I tried to say anything about my specific predicament, the curse would activate, driving me back and prompting me to do something monstrous, like wear socks with sandals. And that's the other thing that just made me think of it too, which is like the more jokey bits related to this person and their predicament brought up just more questions to me about this world. I felt like they were jokes that only worked for the audience but didn't work within the world, because I'm just like, well, that is then presuming that in this world there's like a horrible faux pas of wearing socks with sandals. And I know that seems so nitpicky, but again, the more and more it popped up, the more I'm like, okay, that just seems so weird and specific and out of nowhere. I don't know. Maybe it's just to me. Oh, and to get an idea of the theme, kind of some of the messages, the little nuggets spread throughout that I thought were heartwarming and endearing, and I think makes it a great book for younger people that has a lot of messages you don't always see, is this one. One of the great tragedies of life is knowing how many people in the world are made to soar, paint, sing, or steer, except they never get the chance to find out. Oh, sorry, I have two. So here's the second quote. We always pretend the ideals and culture of the past have aged like wine, but in truth, the ideas of the past tend to age more like biscuits. They simply get stale. And see, you have that great, like, almost British wit there. And I wanted it to stay that way. I don't. So, fun little world. I like the love interest. I like the main character. I liked how the journey the main character goes on in growing into herself and adapting to situations. And I liked certain bits of the narrator's voice, even though it did change. There were still enough moments to keep me going that I really appreciated. So I think that's enough of the non-spoilery section. Here are just some random spoilers, and I don't really have much of a script, so it's just gonna be chaotic and whatever I can think of in the moment. As you might have guessed from the earlier part, a lot of the troubles come in Act 3. Though the one thing I will say about earlier on is I knew one of the twists by page 75. And for anyone who knows me, that's not a good thing. I'm not a gal who tries to solve mysteries. I'm a very passive reader. And so if Kelly is guessing or knows the mystery or the plot twist, that means she is bored or it is really easily telegraphed. I'm just like, yeah, that's what's gonna happen. It wasn't an end of the world kind of thing, but it just meant that the like progressive reveals for that part of the story, I was just like, duh. So they just kind of landed a little flatter than they would, so I thought I would mention that. Parentheses, the spoiler being that Charlie, the love interest, is Huck the rat. Just felt so obvious, both in a few things that are mentioned, but also just as a writer being like, you can't have the love interest not there 90% of the story. You gotta have him in some way. Yeah, so Act 3, narrator Hoyd and the sorceress. It really annoys me because this is marketed and a lot of people talk about how it is a standalone book. It is not a standalone book. Is it a book that probably will not have sequels or prequels? Yes. Does it stand alone? I disagree because the narrator and all of Act 3, I think you have to know more about the Cosmere and you have to know about like the sorceress and Hoyd in order to appreciate and like the ending, which is kind of a major point of reading a book, is liking the ending. I had to like do a little Google on it because I could not stand alone on what was in the book. And apparently Hoyd and the sorceress known as Raina are in other things here and there, and they're also part of different worlds or planets in the Cosmere. But I didn't care about them. And they just took time away from the characters I did care about. This is the point, like Hoyd coming in to like save the day kind of took, again, it kind of sucked some of the victory out from under Tress. And I'm like, all right, I guess. I felt like there could have easily been a way to do it with Tress and the crew of the ship. That's what I think, there's a way. And then you get this with the sorceress, the reveals of certain thing, like techie stuff. I get that in the Cosmere there is this range of different planets with different progressions of technology and or magic systems, but it hadn't been there for the entire book. And this is more of a vibes book. Like it tries to do plot and it tries to do some mystery, what have you, adventure. But for me, it's all about the vibes. It's a vibe book and it didn't fit the vibe. It wasn't part of the reason why I had picked this book up. And so for it to come in, it was just like, that's weird. Don't know why that was necessary. Oh yeah, and like, it was, I don't know, the last 50 to 75 pages was on the island of the sorceress and dealing with the sorceress and like epilogue kind of stuff. And I just thought that was such odd pacing. Like we spent so much time. I almost wish we could have skipped the sorceress and have somehow the beating the baddie of Captain Crow in some way led to saving Charlie. I would have been fine with that. I think that would have been better. Sorry. I still don't quite understand Hoyd or the sorceress because again, there's like, he is not himself for the majority of it because he's under a curse. The sorceress isn't on page for most of the novel, so we don't learn much about her. And of course, Tress doesn't know about either of them, so it's only what's revealed at the end that we get. And people say this is a standalone book with like Easter eggs for those who are avid Brandon Sanderson readers and have read his other stuff. I don't think they're Easter eggs if they're vital to the plot. Like, maybe I would have liked it better if I knew Hoyd from other stuff. Maybe the reveal that the sorceress is Rena would have been meaningful and I would have been able to fill in the blanks and really love it and be like, ooh, hey bitch, what you doing here? If I knew she existed. And then I wouldn't have been thrown by the tech thing because I would have presumably known she already does techie things and like what her skill set is. So after that, kind of disappointing secondary climax almost. Kinky. Because like again, the bulk of it is on like defeating Captain Crow. And that's like where the real action and tension and moment for Tress is in. We have this wrap up bit and it's cute, it's whatever, but it is a longer, like a little thicker of a book. And while I enjoyed how they wrap things up, I thought that was really cute. I think if the book had been a little bit shorter and Act 3 hadn't just like pooped out on me, I would have like died for this ending. I would have been so like over the moon that like everything wrapped up in a happy but quirky in a funny way. But instead I was just like, okay. And I think that's the sad but important thing about endings, is that we humans are really stuck on the last note of a thing, which is why like studies show like a procedure could have like a lot of pain, but if at the end, if it has less pain or even pleasure, it'll be like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Because we are very fickle creatures. So it ended up landing solidly in the good category for me overall. 13.5, perfectly good book. Sorry, Rose again, Jay. I think you rated it higher, but those two characters in that Act 3, ugh, that was a little rough going. If you've read this book, I really, really want to know what you think and put it down below. What were your thoughts about this book? But also, what did you know going in? Like, how much of like Sanderson's world have you read up to that point? Because I think that makes a big difference. And then if you haven't read this book, let me know. Does it sound like your cup of tea? Does any of the problems I have change your mind on if it might be a book for you or not? And like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye!